Welcome everyone. My name is Allison and I'm an Info Services Librarian at the Arlington Heights Memorial Library. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to be with us virtually tonight to learn about career research essentials. I'm joined tonight by my colleague Barb, who will help me monitor chat. With that, I'm happy to introduce tonight's speaker, Lynée Alves. Lynée Alves is an expert resume writer and a successful career coach. She helps individual clients effectively position their skills and experience, and also provides guidance on job search strategies, interviewing skills, and mindset strategies. Lynée developed her skills during her 29-year career in corporate America. She recruited, interviewed, and hired top talent at Fortune 50 and 500 companies, as well as a startup company that went global. Lynée was also a very successful job candidate herself, securing 5 director-level roles in 7 years. She knows what employers want to see and hear, and she loves sharing what she knows so that others can have more productive and successful job searches and career transitions. She is currently serving as the resident career coach for CBS 2 Chicago and works with the news team to create weekly segments focused on job search tips and strategies for consumers. Lynée received her degree in broadcast journalism from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and she is a member of the Chicago Writers Association and the Arlington Heights Chamber of Commerce. And with that, I am going to turn our night over to Lynée Alves.
Well, thank you so much, Allison, for that lovely introduction. I appreciate it. And now I will take over and share my screen with everybody. So bear with me while we get into that, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I see we've got 19 people in the room, so I'm happy to be here with you this evening. Thank you for making time for this presentation. I'm really excited to share lots of great information with you that is going to help support a more successful job search if that is something that you're engaged in right now, or if you expect to be engaging in one soon. So as, Allison said, my name is Lynée Alves. I am president of Interview Like an Expert. I do have over 20 years of experience recruiting, interviewing, and hiring talent for top organizations. I am currently working just kind of since the height of COVID. I've been working with CBS 2 Chicago on their career coach segment, and we have been providing content each week on the morning news on Thursday mornings, and sometimes it's rerun during the week, but really just trying to get this information out to the masses to help people during these challenging times when we have very high unemployment. So what I do as a career coach is I work with my clients on job search, on career transitions, interview coaching. I also help with resume rewrites and LinkedIn rewrites, and teaching people how to use LinkedIn most effectively. So we're going to touch on all of these subjects tonight, which is great. So you're going to get a taste of all of this information. So if you have a pen and paper, I certainly encourage you to take notes. There'll be some great information, actionable information that you can use here. So first, let's talk about the current career situation. I know many people know what the deal is, but the truth is that there is a lot of competition. Now, I will tell you that this is something that I have presented on pre-COVID, and it was still a lot of competition pre-COVID, but obviously due to COVID, there has been a big spike in unemployment, and there are even more people applying for available jobs. Now, you're not only competing with those who are unemployed, though, but you're also competing with people who are currently employed but unhappy in their jobs. And even those people, even during this challenging economic time, are also looking to potentially move or see potential changes in their careers or at their companies and are readying for moves. So there's just, simply put, a lot of competition for the available jobs out there. The other thing I want to really make sure everybody's aware of is that technology is being used at every step of this process. And so I call this the rise of the bots, specifically related to when you're submitting a resume in for a role. 98% of Fortune 500 companies and a large number of small and mid-sized businesses are filtering resumes through an applicant tracking system. You may have heard this term ATS, before anybody takes a look at your resume, or if they ever do. And now I know this is not welcome information, but I want people to understand why in many cases they don't hear from employers. I'd like to share a story. A woman who I know who used to be in HR at CNN down in Atlanta now is a freelance human resources consultant and advisor. She was working with a client and they posted a role for an operations manager. I think it was on one of the major engines too, maybe like an Indeed or a ZipRecruiter. They got 2,000 applicants, and this was a year ago. So again, pre-COVID, 2,000 people applied for this one role. And she shared with me that there was absolutely no way they could go through all 2,000 applicants. So what they did is they sifted through what they had gotten and identified 10 to 12 qualified applicants and then moved forward with interviewing. So I let you know this because I want you to know that while job seekers are super frustrated with the lack of responsiveness sometimes, or with quick rejections, right? Electronic rejections. The flip side of it is that employers are dealing with really like a tsunami of applicants. And again, compared to last year, they're probably getting even more. So they have to leverage technology. They don't have the staffs that they used to have in HR. They don't have people like when I used to recruit many years ago, gosh, like 20 plus years ago, I literally looked through a stack of resumes, but people don't do that anymore, not much anyway. And so this makes this whole process a lot more challenging. So what I tell my clients is that applying is just the first step of this process. So if you expect to simply apply for a job and hear back, that strategy is going to be a difficult one. Not impossible, but a little bit more difficult. So because of the increased usage of this applicant tracking system software, job seekers also need to employ networking and leverage tools like LinkedIn, where you can do electronic networking to get your application or your resume noticed by the people who might be making the hiring decision, or get your resume or application into the hands of those people who will be making a hiring decision, like a recruiter, like an HR manager or a hiring manager. So really the key things to know right now, the job market is more flooded than it's ever been in many, many years with candidates, especially for those more desirable roles. Job searches are certainly going to take longer, can take longer at any level, but again, could be more so for those people in higher level roles, because as you think about the corporate ladder anyway, right, there are more roles typically at staff level, but as you move up that ladder, there are fewer and fewer roles. So if somebody is a manager, a director, a vice president, and has been laid off, there are just fewer potential roles for them to search for at that same level right now. Doesn't mean it's impossible. So I want you to know there are still plenty of job opportunities out there. There are still people getting hired. It is just a process, though, that you need to be able to navigate in a more sophisticated way than perhaps you had to in the past in order to have greater success. So I talked about the fact that technology is being leveraged every step of the way. So that's online applications, this ATS software, LinkedIn, which is a really important tool, video interviews, which probably you've been experiencing now more than ever, certainly with Zoom or GoToMeeting or Microsoft Teams, whatever the tool is. If you're doing any interviewing, that's how it's being done these days, and more. You might have a recorded video interview too that you need to submit. So technology is a big piece of the job search process. So the bottom line is it's changed significantly, this whole process over the past several years, and it can be very overwhelming to job seekers at any level, whether they're younger in their career, mid-career, or later in their career. The days of, like when I started in my career over 30 years ago, being able to feel pretty confident that when you submitted a resume, you had a good chance of hearing back if you were a good fit. Things have gotten much more complex over the years. So I'm going to try and help and simplify all of this for you tonight. So here's today's agenda. We're going to talk about job search strategies, resume tips and best practices, the importance of LinkedIn and how you can use it effectively, interviewing tips and best practices, mindset strategies, and then if we have time at the end of tonight's presentation, we'll have a little bit of Q&A time. So you can pop those questions into the chat at the end of the presentation. I encourage you to certainly pop them in there with each section if you like, or wait till the end and see if I answer your questions, and then we can run through them at the end. So let's dig into job search strategies first. This is a great little tool and tip for all of you, and I teach it to all of my private clients and to my group coaching clients as well. Google Jobs. You may not be aware of this, but it is a great resource and an enormous time saver for job seekers. Google Job Search will bring back results from all of the major job search engines, the major job posting engines, ZipRecruiter, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, CareerBuilder, and more. Now, the one major site that you do not get results for through Google Jobs is Indeed. So Indeed must not have agreed to provide their listings to Google, but everybody else has. So the good news is that you can, certainly you can look at certain individual sites, but this can cut down a lot on your the difficulty of search, and you can reduce significantly the number of sites that you're visiting in order to look for job postings. So let me show you what it looks like. So if you just go into your Google search function and enter the job title plus the location. So in this example that it's probably hard to read, I entered sales representative, Chicago, Illinois. And then what you're going to get is something that looks like what you see on the left. This screenshot is exactly what will come back. This big blue bar that says jobs with 3 featured jobs, and then a link at the bottom of that square that says 100 plus more jobs, or whatever the number of jobs is, depending on the title you're searching for. With sales, of course, we're going to see a lot. So when you click on that link, you're going to land here. And here is a page where you've got lots of postings in a row that you can look through. You can kind of see here, I'm actually in this case on the top one, the enterprise sales rep for Amazon. So you can see that you've got a description down here on the right. You have links to the different places where you can apply for this job. And obviously, probably you can apply on Amazon's website as well. I do want to tell you that I encourage you, when you find job postings, any job postings, certainly, ideally, you apply on the company's website. As a second choice, I would go with a job site provider or poster that is one that's well known, like Glassdoor, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, CareerBuilder. But when you see some of these other ones like Jobalyze or Apply on Jobs, these may be sites that are just scraping postings from the internet and creating their own kind of job search site for people, but they're not necessarily a site that Amazon has officially posted on. I'm not quite sure how that works, but these are ones that are a little less known. So I recommend that you go with a named entity, one that you're familiar with, but certainly check out the company's site first. So let me highlight a few other things here that I want you to explore. We're not going to be able to go through every one of these tabs live today, but you can see up here that you've got category, in this case of a role, right? Is it a customer service or accounting and finance, management, advertising? What kind of sales role is it? And then as we move across the top, you can look at the title of the role, because there are a bunch of different kind of versions of sales representative. So what I love about Google search is that when you look at the title, you can see related titles and do new searches on those. So you might discover a title that you hadn't thought of to search for the type of role that you're looking for. You can also choose to see postings that are ones that you haven't seen before. So once you do a deep dive into this, let's say you were to go into this tomorrow and look for a job, and you've looked through all the postings, the next time you come in, you can say, just show me what I haven't seen. So you don't have to keep cycling through a lot of postings that you've already looked at and determined, you may have already applied, or you may have decided they're not a fit. You can also filter by location. This is an amazing tool. You'd be able to look at that more deeply once you go on your own. The type of job, full-time, part-time, temporary, it's all right there. the company type, and then the actual employer. So you can really do a lot of searching right here within this tool in order to have a more productive search. And you can also, as you can see down here in the lower left, turn on email alerts for various searches. So you can create a few different searches within this Google search tool, job search tool, and then start getting search alerts. And this will make your process a whole lot easier. Now other sites offer this as well, but this is just nice because it'll be all in one place for you. If you also want to look on Indeed, then you would need to go there as well. But in that case, then you'd literally be down to 2 different sites that you'd be using for job search versus a handful or more. So I hope that's helpful for you, but this is a really great resource. So with that, let's talk about resume best practices. I was telling Allison that I recently did a big resume presentation, and it was really well received. I know so many people have so many questions about resumes, so let's talk about them. So best practices for resumes. It's really important as a job seeker that you have an updated and contemporary format and layout. And a lot of people, again, if you've been in the job market, or if you've been employed, I should say, for a long time, your resume may look a little dated. You may not be up to date on some of the most current kind of layouts and what that should look like. So let's start with some of the basics. I suggest that you use a sans serif font. Now, for those of you who are not graphic designers, you're not going to even maybe know what that term is, but you can see here that I'm showing you a serif font, which is Times New Roman. Times New Roman, very popular font. When I was starting out in my career, I would hazard a guess that my resume was all in Times New Roman. But these days it looks a little dated to me on a resume. So, and a serif font, just so you know, is you see all the little kind of decorative elements right there on the ends of the letters. That's a serif font, one that features that. A sans serif font, and my personal favorite is Calibri, that I use on resumes that I create, is one that's just straight lines, no decorative elements on the end. It just makes it a little cleaner and easier from my perspective, and a little bit more modern looking, without being out there, without being over the top. So I really recommend that. I recommend that you create a clean header, and I'm going to show you what this looks like in just a moment. I suggest that you include your LinkedIn URL, and I'm going to talk this evening as well about how you can create your own custom URL that you can use on your resume, that you can use and link to in maybe your email signature as you're corresponding with potential employers or recruiters. It's also important to have an engaging professional summary and highlight your key skills and strengths. Now, again, for those of us who have been working for 25 or more years, we may have come up, I certainly came up in a world where the resume opened with what was called an objective, and that is no longer a current kind of formatting. It's no longer current formatting for the resume. Now we start with a professional summary, which is just a little bit different. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So I'm taking the first chunk of this, and we're going to look at the header, the professional summary, and your key strengths and skills first. So I'll start from top to bottom. Just stick with me. You can see here's the font is Calibri. So I hope you can see it's very readable. Very, very easy on the eyes. So this makes it easy for that hiring manager, once your resume actually gets to a human being, for them to read it. It's also easy for the software to scan. So your resume has to be kind of formatted equally for both audiences. The audience of the software, right, that's got to scan it. So you want this to be very clean, very easy for software to read and parse into the system. But then once the resume gets into the hands of the hiring manager, the recruiter, the phone screener, you also want it to be very pleasing to the eye and easy to navigate and read. So the resume designs that I use really hit on both of these points quite well. So you can see that the header here, you've got your name in nice big bold type. Your name is one of the most important things on your resume, so definitely highlight it. And then right under your name is a very simple line of information. You no longer need to have your full address. You can literally just put your city and state, your phone number, and if you're using a cell phone, which most people are, but regardless of whether you are or aren't, make sure that the phone number that you list has voicemail attached to it or some kind of answering machine or service. And please make sure you've got a personal greeting on that voicemail. When I was recruiting years ago, when I was calling Susie Smith because I wanted to interview her, it was always a little bit uncomfortable if I got a message that wasn't a personal greeting from Susie and it just said, "You've reached 12345678990." Even though that's the number on the resume, even though I'm pretty sure this is the right person, I want to be certain. So it's a really nice professional touch to make sure that you've got that personal greeting. And then your email address. And similarly, I know I'm talking a lot about people maybe who've been in the market longer, but if you've been working a while and your default email address that you use for most of your personal business is a Hotmail address or an AOL address, I strongly suggest that you create a new email address that you can put on your resume that is, again, more updated. AOL and Hotmail, unfortunately, will date you. So there's kind of a generation of people where that was their core email. And so what we don't want to do is, if you're a more experienced candidate, is give an employer a hint about how old you are, because we don't want you taken out of contention for potential roles that you want to be considered for. So I strongly recommend you go to Gmail, you can go to Yahoo, right, and get an email. You also can even get, if from your internet service provider like Comcast, they allow you to create a free email as part of your internet service package. So there are lots of options for you where you can get free email addresses, but if you are using one of those more dated addresses, I suggest that you update that as well. And then we'll talk about this later and how to do this, but you can also create a LinkedIn vanity or custom URL. LinkedIn assigns you a URL, but the one that they assign you has some random numbers and letters here at the end of your name. So I'll show you how you can update your URL so that you can post it here. And like I said, you can use it in emails. Now, I don't make, on my resumes, I do not make the email or the LinkedIn address hyperlinks. You can if you want to, it's a personal choice. The only reason I don't is because it changes the color and I just keep mine all black. But if you want, you can hyperlink this. Sometimes people will be looking at them on a screen, but more often than not, I find that people really aren't necessarily linking off of this. I didn't when I was a hiring manager, but again, personal preference for you if you want to do that or not. So let's talk a little bit about the professional summary. I want you to see what it looks like. You can see here that this professional summary is just 6 lines, 5.5 lines long. So this is not super extensive. We're not looking to write down your career history here. What we're looking to do with your professional summary is talk about you and your role and what you love about the work that you do and what has made you successful. So for example, you can read some of the content here. Experienced operations manager with a consistent record of performance and achievement in fast-paced environments. Skilled at leading, motivating, and coaching team members in order to support company objectives. Highly engaged and hands-on manager with ability to quickly understand and assess, I think it's current processes and identify areas for improvement, and on and on. So you can hear that, and you can hear it's quite powerful. We're talking about some really desirable attributes, skills, experience that this candidate brings to the table. And you're really painting a picture here for an employer of who you are, what you do, and why you might be desirable to them as a potential employee. So this is a great area. It's got to be well written, very thoughtfully edited, but it's great information to grab the attention, again, of the interviewer once you actually land an interview. And it's also loaded with some keywords too. So we're really hitting on a few different things here with this piece. And then right below it, more keywords, more key phrases, your key strengths and skills. So this is just a nice, easy, clean way to highlight some more information at a glance. You know, today, everybody's attention spans are so much reduced. We move at the speed of light. We absorb and intake information at a very fast pace. So making your resume easy to ingest, quickly and easy to navigate quickly is a really great thing to do. And so you can see here that this is, some really important real estate on your resume. I would tell you that the most important real estate on your resume is anywhere from the top third to the top half of your resume, which will include this section, as well as at a minimum, your most recent professional experience. So with that, let's move to the next section. So it's important to, when we talk about your professional experience, make sure that it's clearly written and includes results and accomplishments that would be of value to your next employer. So for example, I see a lot of resumes from people that say, when I get the version that they have now, say, here's what I do, right? It's a listing of like, I do this, I execute that. But then they don't say, and what's the benefit? What was the result? What was the accomplishment? What's the benefit to the company or to the organization of the work that you've done? I increased membership X%. I increased sales by X number of dollars. I increased our social media followers by X number. So you can see that there's not just what you do, but what result did it garner, so that an employer can read that and see, wow, this is something that this person could do for us. And then I know, again, I keep harping on those of us who have more experience, but I'm one of you. So I want you to know that your dated experience, and what I mean by that is the experience on your resume that has dates attached, should only go back 20 to 25 years. Again, as I said earlier, employers are not allowed to ask how old you are in this process, but if we give them hints, they'll figure it out awfully quickly. Now, I'll talk to you in just a little bit about how you might be able to represent some older experience or prior jobs without dates, but it's important for you to know that you really want to cut the dates off at about 20 years or 25 max. Keep in mind that that experience that you had 30 years ago just isn't as relevant today. I mean, yes, certainly if you were in sales and that was kind of when you were coming up through your sales experience, of course, it taught you everything you learned, but where you're at today is much more relevant to that employer. So those jobs just don't need that same level of attention on your resume. So let's take a look at what it looks like. And I know this looks like a lot, so stick with me again. I'll take you through top to bottom. So depending on your circumstances, you can have a brief company summary. So you've just got your company name and then the city and state. And I only use years. I don't use month and year because I think it just keeps it cleaner. And these days, with people being out of work, I know people get very anxious about, showing that they're unemployed. And it's okay. People, and specifically employers, do understand what's going on in the marketplace right now. But this is actually a nice way for you to be a little bit vague about how long you've been unemployed if you are unemployed, right? So if you just say through 2020 or through present, if you were recently let go from someplace, that's completely acceptable. And by the way, the rule of thumb is that, if you've been laid off and you are unemployed, that you can still leave on your resume and on your LinkedIn the fact that you're still at your old company for anywhere from 30 to 90 days. It's really whatever you're comfortable with, but you don't have to immediately put that end date on there and define it. You can leave that a little murky for a period of time. At a certain point, you probably need to change it, but you don't have to do that right away. So back to our company. It's optional for you to put a company summary on your resume. I suggest this for people who maybe work at a company that isn't super well known. So if you work at Citibank, if you work at Comcast, if you work at AT&T, these are companies that people know. So you don't need a company summary. And frankly, it takes up a little space. Now, if you work at a local company that maybe isn't going to be familiar to other people, even other mid-sized businesses maybe won't know other mid-sized businesses' names if they're not in the same category of business, for example. So in those cases, I'll guide my clients to add a brief sentence, maybe two, at most 1 or 2 lines at most, that just says, what does this company do? And the way you take the way you figure that out is just go to the website, see what's kind of like the easiest, quickest way to describe what this company does. Keep it simple though. It's really just to kind of give the interviewer, the potential employer, an idea of where you are working, what kind of field. Same thing applies for your job position. So in this case, this gentleman who I worked with was Director of Fulfillment Services. And again, I thought, well, you know, this isn't a familiar title to me. It could be to other people, but just in case, I'm going to say, hey, here's what my overall responsibility was. So again, that's optional. You could also just put this as a bullet point directly underneath the role. So now let's talk about some of the results and accomplishments. You can see here's a number. You can't see all the content, but he oversaw an annual operating budget of 2.2 million. Getting some specifics into your resume that gives somebody a sense of what you're managing or handling is super helpful for an employer and an interviewer. Let's look here. So when we look down at the first accomplishment, he had actually consolidated a few warehouse locations, and this resulted in savings of $535,000 in rent, insurance, and taxes. Now, what employer doesn't want to see something like that, right? So this is a great example of what I was talking about before. He could have just said that he consolidated 3 warehouses into one and left it at that. And when we do that and we don't include that result or accomplishment, it's just not as powerful. So I call what I do in my resume writing powerful positioning. We're taking what you do, we're elevating it, and we're ensuring that when there are opportunities for us to highlight a result or accomplishment, that we do it and we make sure that it's something that's really impressive or could be impactful or of interest to that next potential employer. So similarly, you know, in a warehouse environment, it's important to focus on safety. And in this case, this gentleman achieved an average increase of 10% or greater on safety scores through communication and enforcement of corporate safety policies. Now, this gets a couple of messages across, right? The increase in scores, the fact that he's focused on it, and the fact that he is supporting, actively supporting company policies and company initiatives. These are all a lot of ideas in a very, you know, tight sentence, right? A lot of concepts that I think are very appealing to that next potential employer. So next on your resume is your technical skills and proficiencies. So once you've listed out your professional experience, you want to add a section for technical skills and proficiencies. Obviously, most jobs have some level of tech involved. Certainly working on a computer in many cases, whether it's an actual computer, whether it's, you know, computerized machinery, it could be any kind of tech, but understanding that this is an important piece for employers and for employees. So highlighting what you know is important there. And then for your education, which is the final section on your resume, again, if you are more experienced, you want to remove that graduation year. I say after 15 to 20 years is the point where you can remove it. So again, I want you to remove these little markers that are an indicator of age, because we don't want to give an employer insight into that. Obviously, it is technically against the law for any employer to discriminate against somebody on the basis of age. But if we let them know what our age is, it's possible that it could happen. So we want to eliminate that possibility wherever we can. So let's have a look at what these sections look like. So technical skills and proficiencies. Now you can see here, it's not a lot. I'm not laundry listing everything. However, for like people who are, say, computer programmers and coders, they might be working in a lot of different languages. So they might have more here. So those technical resumes might be a little bit different, but I'm showing you a non-technical resume in this case. So in this case, this gentleman was working in SAP, in Oracle, and Microsoft Office Suite. You can spell out which Microsoft programs you've used or not. It's up to you. For example, if you're in the financial field, certainly Excel and being a power Excel user is typically an important skill. So you may choose to list that out, or to say, you know, highly advanced Microsoft Excel skills or something like that, or in Access and things like that. So again, use your best judgment, but for most people, just summarizing it simply is good. You can also put G Suite on here, which would be the Google suite of Office software, including Google Docs, right? Gmail. So if that's something that you use in the business you're in, might be good to call that to somebody's attention, because some businesses are using a lot of the Google software in their business as well. So next is education. So you can see that in this case, this gentleman featured his university that he went to, but he also had an associate in culinary arts. Now, he wasn't pursuing a role that had to do with this. He was not looking to be a chef. He had been a corporate chef many years ago at Motorola, actually, but he did want to represent it on his resume. Again, it could be in his, in his mind, it was like a conversation starter, just something of interest. So it wasn't necessarily required for the role he was going for, but it was something he wanted to share. So again, you can always determine, is that something you add or not? We could have just as easily taken it off for him. So that's everything on your resume, a quick high-level overview. Of course, there's much more, but that's what we're going to go through tonight. I hope that was helpful. So now we're going to move into LinkedIn, which is just as important as your regular resume because it's your online resume. So it's such a valuable tool, LinkedIn, for anyone who's actively or passively job searching. Now, certain people and certain roles and professions may not be as active on LinkedIn. However, I certainly recommend it as a resource for anybody and everybody, because there are so many people, there are so many contacts. No doubt anybody is going to know, anybody who gets on there is going to know other people on there. So you can build a network of people up, both from your professional life, your personal life, your neighborhood life. Like any and everybody are people that you can link in with there, and you can count among your network on the platform. It is really recognized, LinkedIn is, as the go-to resource for online professional profiles and professional social networking. And as we talked about earlier in the job search section, LinkedIn certainly has a great database of high quality job postings. In fact, certainly depending on the type of role you're looking for, if the profession that you're in is one where it's highly likely to be posted on LinkedIn, I certainly think their job search function is excellent. So I just suggested Google Job Search because their results come in, but certainly I think they've got an excellent job search platform on LinkedIn. And something else I want you all to know, recruiters who are working on filling jobs are actively on LinkedIn searching for candidates every day. Recruiting and staffing firms, they buy a specialty version of LinkedIn software. It's called LinkedIn Recruiter. And they pay anywhere from $2,500 a year to $3,000 a year for each individual recruiter to have their own license for LinkedIn Recruiter. I spoke with a woman who's an executive recruiter. I did an interview with her in my free Facebook group, which I'll share with you all later. And she told me that that's one of the biggest expenses for her business is the licensing for that LinkedIn Recruiter software. But it's that important to recruiters. So I want you to know, this is another reason why LinkedIn is so important, because there are recruiters searching for jobs that may not even be posted, right? Recruiters may be trying to find a lot of people for certain big, staff ups for accounting, or, like Robert Half does, certain types of roles, right? Administrative roles, accounting roles. And they may have recruiters just powering through LinkedIn looking for people who they think are well qualified for the opportunities, or to build up a quick like bench of talent that they can bring to their employers who they're working with. So it's so important to be active on LinkedIn and to utilize it, because it is a great resource for you professionally. So now let's talk about what I highlighted earlier, and that's how you can clean up your personal URL. So when you go onto LinkedIn, you're on your home feed or you're on your profile page. You see in the upper right corner here under the photo, under where it says me, this gray text that says edit public profile and URL. And while it doesn't look like it's a hyperlink, it is a hyperlink. So when you click that, you're going to go here. And you're going to be brought, it's the same exact area, it's still in the upper right part of the page. And now you'll see that it says edit URL. So when you click that blue pencil, you can go in and remove those random letters and numbers that follow your name. I just made this up, but this is what it looks like when you have not cleaned up your URL. And sometimes I see people coming to me with resumes where they have their URL from LinkedIn on there, but they haven't cleaned it up. So it just looks a little sloppy. It takes up too much room, to be honest. So the easiest thing to do is to click on that pencil, and then here's what I recommend for you. If your first name, last name is not available, and if you have a common name like John Smith, that may be the case. You may not be able to get that combination like I was able to get. But you could add a middle initial, you could add a number after your name, a dash in between. They do allow a dash, even though it says here that they don't allow special character. The dash is not counted. So you could do that, but I do suggest that you keep it super short. So because you don't want this to take up a lot of room, you want it to be a more attractive version that you can customize. So that's all you need to do for your LinkedIn profile. Once you do that and hit save, you will have an updated URL that you can feature on your resume and that you can feature in an email signature as well. So now let's talk about your actual profile. So just like with your resume, I talked about the header on the resume. And similarly, I want you to create a compelling headline on LinkedIn. So again, things have changed so much over the years. LinkedIn, I think just recently, like maybe last year, celebrated their 15-year anniversary. And I've been on the platform really since the early days. And I remember that previously, when in the early days, my job title, my current job title was automatically what appeared in my headline. But they've made it so that you can change this. So many people maybe still have their headline reading their current job title, and that's it. I know some people, when they're looking for jobs, put here open to new opportunities. I'm going to tell you why I don't recommend that. Not because you shouldn't tell people that. You should absolutely tell people, talk to as many people as you can, network and communicate the fact that you are looking. But don't put that as your headline. And here's why. Again, going back to recruiters searching on LinkedIn, this section is actually a heavily weighted keyword section for recruiters in their searches. So you are much better off having your job title here, along with some other key skills and strengths. So in other words, if you are a sales director, you want it to say sales director or senior sales director. And then you want to say revenue growth and team leadership, things like that. So I hope you get the idea of what I'm talking about here. You can see with mine, I'm a career coach, but then I'm talking about what else I do that are my core skills, right? I'm an interviewing expert. I'm a resume and LinkedIn consultant. I'm a positioning pro. You can see exactly what we're doing here. So that's really compelling. And so getting keywords into your profile, as well as titles that you are looking for or have held, is really important. So really, really important stuff there. So then the next section right under your kind of intro section, which is what that top section on LinkedIn is called, is your about section. Now you can see here that this is what shows on your LinkedIn profile. If you go to your profile page, you only see 2 lines of your about section. But if you click that see more at the bottom of that, you can see this. Now I know that you can't read this. That's not the intention. I really just wanted to show you how much room you have to work with here. This is excellent because, again, you can tell your story a little bit. Now, again, years ago, people kind of talked about themselves in third person on LinkedIn. It was a more formal kind of environment, but with the advent and growth of social media, LinkedIn has become much more a first person, right? Talking about me, here's what I do, here's what I love doing. You can show a little personality here. Talk about what you love, right? I talk about what I love about the work that I do here. So you can really use some of this space to talk about yourself and promote yourself. And again, focus on those things that you know would be of interest to an employer who's looking to hire somebody like you in whatever it is that you do. Make sure that it's focused on the employer and what they would value, not just what you think is interesting, right? So that's another important distinction. All of this marketing that you're doing is about the employer. It's not about you, it's about them. So at the end of your About section, you can see down here that I've got a little area. Sorry, it's covered up by my, my copyright info, but I've got it saying key strengths and skills. So here is where you can do just a comma separated laundry list of keywords. This is also an area that is heavily weighted for keywords, the About section. So if you're only using 2 lines here, I just looked at a new client, her About section today, and she just had like 1 line there. She wasn't using anything that she could use. So I encourage you to use this section and really talk about what you have to offer an employer, what your areas of expertise and experience are, because it's valuable. But in addition, you can add a laundry list of keywords at the bottom, because as you saw a moment ago, right here, people don't see that. But this section is picking up keywords in recruiter searches. So you can put them down here. I'll typically take those key strengths and skills from the top of the resume, like I showed you earlier, and I will comma separate those down here. Then I'll reread the resume and pull out other keywords. So if somebody's a financial analyst, I will pick out other words about what they do, whether it's, I don't know, like it could be, Excel, analysis or just Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Access. It could be pivot tables. It could be anything like that. And anything else that they've got on their resume that's going to support the fact that they're a financial analyst. So a newer feature on LinkedIn over the last several months, and the timing is quite good, is a couple of sections. One's called Open to Opportunities. I imagine many of you have discovered this. It used to be a section called Career Interests, and they've moved it and they've changed it a little bit. And then there's another section called Providing Services. So on the left side here, Open to Job Opportunities. So if you are unemployed, I recommend you use this instead of using your headline to say Open to New Opportunities. Here's where you do that. So then even LinkedIn has kind of changed this, so you don't use this area for that, you use this area. So in here, you can see, you can edit in here, and you can add, I believe, up to 5 different titles of jobs that you are looking for. LinkedIn does not allow you to customize those titles. So depending on what your title is, you might have to play around a little bit to get the titles that are most closely aligned with your current work that you do. You can also define whether you're looking for full-time or part-time work, contract work. This is helping those recruiters who are looking for talent, by the way. So this is a section that's absolutely helping them. It's helping them see what titles you're interested in and what type of work you're looking for. And location is in here too, so you can specify that. And this will help you come up in recruiter searches if they're searching for what you are looking for, okay, in terms of a role. On the right side, you can just let people know if you're providing like freelance services of any sort. So this is certainly helpful. There's a new feature, not a new feature, pardon me, another feature on LinkedIn that I think is actually better for this right now that I'll mention, because I don't have this in the presentation. And I only just started using it a few weeks back, and that's called LinkedIn Pro Finder. If you go on LinkedIn Pro Finder, and let's say you're a marketing person who finds yourself out of work, or a social media person, you could go on there and put yourself, enter your information and apply to be a LinkedIn Pro. And that would mean that you could answer people's requests for that type of work. And perhaps there are businesses out there who either let go people and can't afford to hire them back full-time, or never had full-time people, and they're just looking for freelancers to help them with social media, and maybe they want to build a relationship with somebody. So they're putting those bids out on LinkedIn Pro Finder. So you can look there and position yourself as a pro. Now, in order to do this though, your LinkedIn profile has to back up the fact that you are a pro and that you have a legitimate ability to do the work that you're saying. So LinkedIn will go in and take a look at your profile, and they will kind of basically approve you to be a pro based on what you have in your profile. So again, this is another reason why your profile has to be complete and up to date and thorough. But those are 2 great sections for you to take a look at and to be able to use. Okay, so I also want to talk about activity on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is really a place where, just like many social media, you hear about algorithms and metrics and stuff. Well, LinkedIn values the users who are active on their platform. And again, recruiters are probably going to see people who are more active and more engaged on the platform too. Those profiles will kind of rise to the top. So any activity on LinkedIn is going to help build your visibility, not just among recruiters, but potentially among just hiring managers who might see you. So this could be, activity includes making new connections, so inviting people to connect, sending messages on the LinkedIn platform, liking content in your feed, sharing content, posting articles, or creating posts or updates. Now, speaking of activity and connections, your network size on LinkedIn is one that you want to pay attention to. I know everybody is not in sales. Everybody is not in a profession like mine even. You know, my connections now are up over probably about 1,000 more than they are here. So you don't need to have that many. But the benchmark that LinkedIn has kind of set, and then I think employers kind of look at, is 500 or more. Now, you don't have to have 500 or more, but certainly if you are in a job, a type of job, where having a network would be valued, like sales, you probably want to be at least at that 500 mark. And I want to remind you that on LinkedIn, you can connect to anybody. So you're not limited only to people you've worked with or your bosses. You certainly want to connect with people you've worked with, anybody you know from your prior work. But you might also connect with neighbors, friends, family. The people who are on LinkedIn are not going to be checking who are your connections and what do they do and how do they relate to your job. They're just going to be looking sometimes, in some cases, to see, do you have a professional network? So I'm working with a gentleman who's a technical account manager, and he's had a very successful and lengthy career, but his connections were actually pretty low. He hadn't made it a priority to connect with a lot of people. So he was at 300 and some connections when I mentioned this to him the other day, and he's already up over, I think, up at 600. So he said it was so easy, so many people responded, and he just had never bothered to connect with them. So it's an easy thing to do, and again, for certain jobs, it's going to be probably an important thing for you to do as well. So now let's talk about your skills and endorsements. This is another section, and it's an area where you can leverage keywords, but it's my understanding that this isn't as heavily weighted for keywords as some of the other content that you actually write and create. But you still should use it. You have the ability to put up to 50 skills in here to say, what are you skilled at? And it's important to have it, again, be current, be accurate, and be thorough. Now, LinkedIn will select for you on this page. So this is what you see on your profile page. In my case, these top 3 are showing. Now, your default, if you've not selected what shows here, your default is going to be the 3 skills that you have the most endorsements for. So whatever the quantity is, that's what's going to show. Now, sometimes what I see for people is they'll have 2 things, like you can see here, I've got 2, like interviewing and interview preparation. I've actually changed this since I think I took the screenshot, because they kind of read the same. So I really wanted to have 3 different things here. So I encourage you to look at what's the default, what LinkedIn has pulled up for you. And if it just isn't the best representation of you, you can go in and select what people see as the default on your profile page. So let me show you how. So if you go into skills and endorsements, if we go back, you can see right over here, you've got add a new skill, or you've got edit. So if you hit the edit button, you're going to get into here, and you can do a few things. First of all, you can pin your top 3. So in my case, I had pinned these top 3, right? And I had done this because I had had a 29-year career in media sales. So my default skills that showed on my profile are related to my old career, advertising sales. And in my new career, they weren't as relevant. So I went in and made that change so that my skills that were showing on my profile page aligned with my new career. So you can do that, and you can move these around within this area. But all you do is pin, and if you want to switch any of these, you just click the thumbtack, unpin it, and then you can pin something from below. If you want to delete something, back in the day, LinkedIn used to send us all these messages when we'd pop into the onto our profile page and say, hey, do you want to endorse so-and-so for, I don't know, for, sales or marketing or whatever it was. And so they were constantly feeding us messages about endorsing people, and they've stopped doing that. Now it's actually a bit of a more like multi-step process to endorse somebody for anything. It still can be done, but they're not popping those messages at us so much. So, so you might have something in here. You might have endorsements for something. I did. I think the one that I had was digital media. Or no, it was maybe email marketing. Excuse me, email marketing. I had digital media experience, but I didn't have really email marketing experience. It wasn't part of what I did day to day. But somehow I had amassed endorsements for it. So I went in and I deleted it from my skills, and I added some things that were more current and relevant. And you can do the same. So you can delete, you can reorder, you just push on this and drag them up and around within each section. And there you go. So you can update your skills and endorsements. And then finally, I really want to encourage everybody to leverage the recommendations feature on LinkedIn. This is a great tool to help you build your credibility, build your brand, and to get that like third party endorsement of you and your skills as a professional, of you in whatever it is that you do. You don't have to have a ton of them, but if you're out job hunting, I do suggest that you have at least 1 to 2 that are more recent. So if your last recommendation or on LinkedIn was 10 years ago, or if you don't have any, I do suggest that you go on and that you ask for a couple of people who are big fans who would write you a really nice recommendation, to write you a recommendation. It's a very powerful tool to use on the platform, and I do think that that is something that recruiters and hiring managers look at. I looked at it when I would be interviewing people. I would always look on LinkedIn to see if they had them. I didn't necessarily count it against people if they didn't, but it certainly was nice to see when they did, and it added some weight to that candidate walking in the door, right? If I knew that their former managers spoke glowingly of them, and their former managers or current managers were, they were in the same industry, it made me feel that much better about that candidate. So it's a valuable tool for you. And you can, ask for recommendations. You can give recommendations to people, and all you do is click here, and you'll be taken through a quick sequence that says, who do you want to ask? What's your relationship? And then you can write a personal note requesting a recommendation. Okay, let's move on to interviewing tips now. So we're all excited. We've submitted our resume, we've got our LinkedIn up to date, and yay, we get an interview. That's great. How do you prep for an interview effectively? It's so important to set aside time to visit the company website at a minimum. And things that you want to look at when you're looking at the company website are the key focus areas of the business. How might your role help support the current business strategies? I want you to just think about that, because it's going to help you have a better interview conversation. And if you do this research, it's going to help you reference this information, like I said, during the interview, and help you even develop good questions that you can ask at the end of your interview. You also want to really take a look at your job description and job posting that you applied for. And so I've been, of late, I've been reminding my clients to try and save a copy of these somehow. Just maybe throw a folder together on your computer, on your desktop, just for while you're job searching, and keep a hold of some of these job descriptions and postings that you're applying for. If you're applying for a ton, this may not be realistic, but if you're being selective and applying to roles that are a really strong fit for your skills and experience, and that's what I recommend you do. Applying for a ton of roles where you don't have recent relevant experience might not get you the traction that you're looking for. It's much better to say, what have I done most recently, and apply for those types of roles next. That is going to be your fastest path to your next job, without question. Now, I know some people don't want to do that, or maybe they're in an industry that is challenged, like the hospitality industry or the travel industry. I understand that, but focus on those skills that you have used in your prior role. Like I'm working with an event manager now. There are plenty of corporate events jobs. Yes, those jobs are changing, but those jobs are still in existence, and that skill set is transferable for this person. So look at those job descriptions and postings, read them and kind of think about like, okay, what, do I bring to the table? Let me see what they were looking for and make sure that I'm prepared to highlight and address those things. And then I suggest to people, assuming your resume is really well written, complete, and has those accomplishments and results included, you study your resume. When I write a resume for a client, it ends up being a resource for them, a tool for them. They can literally read their resume to prep for an interview because it's got kind of all of their, as I like to say, their greatest hits. All of the information that they want to highlight to a potential employer is included in that resume. And I didn't mention this earlier, but quick resume tip to go back, your resume should not be any longer than 2 pages. Even if you're an executive, people just don't have the attention span for it. So make sure that your resume is really a greatest hits kind of a document, and it's not detailing way more information than people need to know. I know that we all sometimes are close to the information, too close to our own information. It's hard to edit. So you may need to engage the help of somebody to do that with you and for you. But then once you do, you can use your resume as a study guide for interview prep. So let's talk about phone screens. Phone screens are typically the first step of an interview process. Now these days, people may be going straight to a Zoom call as a screen, right? So you may end up doing a video call as a screen. But prior to COVID, phone screens were used. I'm seeing a combination of them at this point, some phone, some Zoom. Now, these are often handled by a recruiter who could be an internal person or a contract recruiter or a member of the HR team. So this is typically, again, first step in the process. And your goal, starting here and throughout the whole process, is to advance to the next step. Your goal in the phone screen interview and the initial interview is not to get the job. Of course, your end goal is to get the job, but I want you to kind of think about this process in very finite phases, and it's your goal to get to the next step with every interview you have. So if you're doing a phone screen, a true phone screen on the phone, you can't create a cheat sheet of your top strengths and skills. Again, you have that on your resume if you're following the format I shared earlier. And a few work successes, maybe a few things that were a big deal that you could refer to during your interview if you don't have them on your resume. But you can have a cheat sheet. That's my point. You can have it right in front of you on a phone screen. Kind of nice. On any interview, but certainly on your first interview, make sure you keep your answers brief and to the point. Make sure you answer the question that's asked. Many people get nervous. I find sometimes more experienced candidates are trying to kind of tell too much all at once. They're trying to kind of share everything about their career with somebody in an interview, and it's just, it can be overwhelming to the person who's doing the interviewing, because I want you to think about it from their perspective. They're human. This is the first time they've met you or talked to you. They can only ingest so much. So giving them more isn't necessarily a benefit. So I want you, if they ask you A, you answer with B. You don't answer with B through Z, right? Keeping your answers brief is really important, succinct and clear. Most importantly, there's no substitute for this last bullet point, conveying positivity, engagement, energy, and likability. This is what recruiters and hiring managers are looking for, right, in their next employee. I mean, if you can demonstrate this during the interview, that's, you're going to be ahead of a number of other folks. So making sure that you're aware and conscious of the fact that that can differentiate you is really important. And by the way, I know that sometimes we get interviewed by people who are not the most energetic and who are not the most engaging themselves. They're not really making an effort to make this process easy for you. And so even if they don't bring their A game, you need to bring your A game to that interview. So all of that engagement and energy is super important. And so, in addition to the engagement, positivity, I like to talk about soft skills. This is what recruiters, hiring managers, screeners are looking for in addition to your skill set on that first screening call. Soft skills are these things: attitude, your ability to communicate, your engagement, right? teamwork and collaboration. These are things that are helpful to mention or work in if you can, and if appropriate, of course, based on the questions you're asked. I mean, what motivates you? Are you self-motivated? Are you a good problem solver? You know, employers are wanting people who are self-starters, who understand that part of their job is, you know, figuring things out, is, you know, supporting the business and doing what's needed when it's needed, resolving conflicts, really keeping the business moving forward. So these are all skills that are also being looked at when you're on a phone screen. So, you know, you think about your ability to communicate on a phone call or on a video call, and understand that, you know, when I said a moment ago that you don't want to answer with a super long answer, here's why. You know, people are trying to envision, hey, when we have a meeting, whether it's in person, which may not be for a while, or whether it's on Zoom, is this person, you know, going to be a good listener? Are they going to be, you know, able to kind of condense and, you know, kind of be thoughtful about what they're saying and how they're communicating in that environment? So understand that this is also kind of a mini, you know, audition for what are you going to be like as a coworker. It's not just about answering the interview questions. It's a little bit more than that. So here are some tips for success when you're interviewing. If you are nervous, if you have not interviewed in a while, please practice. Practice makes perfect. You know, people often beat themselves up and they say to me, gosh, you know, if I'm doing interview coaching with somebody, they'll be like, God, you can say that so well. Like, why is that? And I said, because I've been practicing it for years. I was in sales for years, and in sales, you learn how to really think on your feet, speak on your feet. And I've got a lot of years of experience doing that. I also was a very experienced interview candidate, as Allison mentioned in tonight's intro. So I got very good at understanding what do people want to hear and how can I articulate that clearly and confidently and powerfully. So practicing, super important. You can locate interview questions online. You can prepare some answers in writing that you can then read out loud. Out loud, super important. So not just thinking about these questions or thinking about what you'd say, but if you've got to go into, you know, the bathroom and look in the mirror and talk to yourself, if you've got to get in your car for privacy because you're embarrassed, you don't want to have other people hear you, do whatever you need to do, but do this out loud. The more you practice saying the words and saying your answers and kind of formulating them in your head and being able to say them off the top of your head, the more prepared and comfortable you're going to be when you're actually in the interview. And by the way, interviews are great opportunities for practice. So certainly I suggest that you try to secure as many as you can, though these days this is quite difficult. So I think that the more practical thing to do is to practice if you have friends or family who can practice with you. If you have somebody who you trust who could give you some feedback, that's even better. You know, or you can work with a career coach. You can work with somebody to help you pinpoint and focus on where do you need help with your interviewing skills. So these are all options for you, but the practice piece is super important. So if you don't feel comfortable with that, it's important to address that for sure, because unfortunately the reality is that moment, you know, those moments are few and far between. So you want to be able to be ready to make the most of them. I liken it to studying for an exam, right? When you get an interview, you know, I've talked about how you're doing your research and you're looking at the company information, you're practicing what you say. And then when you go into the interview, it's like you're going in to take your test, your exam. And we all know from years of taking tests that when you walk in to take the test, you have to just let go and do the best you can do. You've done everything you can to prepare to that point. There's no more prep you can do when it's test time. So do as much prep as you can before test time. So here's some other other recommendations I have for successful interviewing. There's an improv technique called mirroring. I took improv at Second City many years ago, and it was quite hard. But I learned, certainly there's a mirroring technique where you do things like this and you just kind of look at somebody and you just literally look at them and do the same thing they're doing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a version of that. And what I'm talking about is when you have an interviewer who might speak a little more slowly than you. you probably want to match their pace. You can hear that my pace is a little bit quicker, my natural pace. I'm excited. I like talking to people. I like talking to people on video, even if I can't see and hear them. So my pace is a little quicker, but when I'm in situations, whether in an interview or whether I was meeting with a customer in my sales days, and I had somebody who had a different energy, and I knew that the way I was communicating might overwhelm them, might be too much, I would dial it down. Similarly, if somebody's super high energy, you could maybe bring your energy up a little bit as well. So you want to kind of meet that person where they're at, because again, remember, you're trying to create a bond, you're trying to convey likability, and you're trying to allow them to envision seeing you as a coworker. Make sure you're listening. This is another improv technique, believe it or not. Listening is one of the most important things that you can do in that world, because it's what you're going to be using to say what you say next. Just like in an interview, you're listening to the question. You must listen carefully and make sure you're answering what's asked. Speak clearly. Make sure, again, your pace isn't too fast or too slow. Again, if you practice, this will be a bit easier. But most importantly, I want you to be yourself. You know, you want some of yourself to come through, and hopefully the interviewer will help try and, make you feel at ease, and that'll make that a little bit easier. But that's nice. Again, you want to connect with this person. That's part of your goal, because connecting with that person is going to allow them to feel good about moving you forward in their process. Okay, so here's your secret weapon for a successful career search, and that is your mindset. I'm a big believer that you attract what you put out in the world. I'm also a big believer that the way you speak to yourself matters, that the thoughts that you have about yourself and about what you're doing well or not doing well, the thoughts in your head, that all matters. I want you to focus on your strengths. I want you to be confident in your positioning of yourself in your experience. And I want you to remind yourself of the things that you do well. Don't focus on those that you don't do well, right? When you feel dejected, or if you feel dejected during a job search, remind yourself of what you know, that you're skilled, that you're capable, that you had this other job for a long time, and you will find another job again. Give yourself that message, and don't give yourself a message of doom and gloom, because your mindset plays a definite role in, I think, the results that you get, because the energy you're putting out through your fingertips, even, when you're sending that application, if you're not optimistic, if you're angry, if you're frustrated, when you're doing this exercise that I know is easy to produce anger and frustration, but if that's the energy you're bringing to it, then maybe step away for a little bit and come back when you can kind of right your mind. There are lots of tools and resources that people can use during these times. Meditation, I know a lot of people have been hearing more about it, and I know a lot of people still aren't familiar with it. I personally have used Headspace, and I did the whole beginner series, because I didn't know anything about meditation, but it has really taught me a lot about how to control my thoughts, and especially any runaway thoughts that get out of control. Now, they do have a free offer for those who are unemployed right now, so go to their website if you want to explore that. You do have to apply. I don't know if they're still running it. The last time I checked, they were. And then Calm is another app, but both of them are offering free meditations for people right now because of everything that's going on in the world. So at a minimum, you can access some free meditations, select meditations, but in the case of Headspace, you can apply for their free full offer of them providing you with the app for free. I also believe that using affirmations can be quite helpful. And one of my favorites that I personally use is by the Honest Guys. You can find this on YouTube. You can hook your phone up to Bluetooth in your car. And when you're driving, you can recite these out loud, which I do. Just did like a week ago, I think. It's really great. It's a good reminder of the things that you want to be focused on. And it's very positive. If you don't like that one, you can find lots of others. There's other books, like Melanie Beattie's book called Journey to the Heart, Daily Affirmations, that are just intended to tell you to be easy on yourself, it's okay if today didn't go well. Lots of things like that are simple, quick little readings that you can do that can help you stay the course and help you remind yourself that it's all going to be okay. You can also look at books by Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer, Brene Brown. And then there's some non-traditional business leaders. Gary Vaynerchuk is on LinkedIn, and he's also all over Twitter. Tim Ferriss is an interesting guy to follow. Simon Sinek is a guy who's all about support and positivity in the workplace. So these are just some resources that I thought I would throw out there for you in case this is of interest to you, that you can explore. But your mindset really plays an important role in your job search. So with that, I just wanted to let you know that is the end of our kind of core part of our presentation today. If there are questions, I'm going to just let you know that you can pop those into the chat. I have a few that I can get us started with if we don't have any yet, that I can provide some guidance on while they're coming in, if that's okay, unless we already have some. So let me check in with Allison on that.
Lynée, we do have a couple that have come in.
Great.
One is a very simple question. Does Google Jobs include postings from monster.com?
I believe so. I believe so. I think I don't remember seeing a lot of them, but again, I think it depends on what type of job you're looking for. I believe they do. I believe they do. Literally the only one I found is not is Indeed. So I'm 99% sure, but not 100%. Sorry, but it's not one that I see come up as commonly as other ones. But I think it is in there.
Okay, and this was a question that was asked during the LinkedIn portion of the program, but I think it could apply to a couple of the sections you talked about. So what if your formal name is, let's say, Robert, but everyone knows you as Bob, or something similar? Your real name is William, but people call you Bill. What's the best way to present your informal name where it is recognized globally versus your formal name?
You know, again, that's personal preference. It's funny, I'm working with a woman on her resume, for example, and her first name's Catherine. And she told me when we talked, she goes by Kat, but on her resume, she's got Catherine, right? So I think it's really what you're comfortable with. So if you want to professionally present yourself with your formal name, but then when you meet somebody, you let them know, you can call me Bill, or I go by Bill, that's fine. Or you can switch it out and use Bill the whole time. I don't think anybody on the receiving end of this professionally, whether it's a recruiter or an employer, has any issue with it, and you need not worry about it. It's really just your personal preference. But you can always present your formal name professionally, and then when you have the opportunity to have that personal interaction, you can always let people know that you don't use your formal name, that you use a more informal version of your name.
That's great. And you might have the same answer for this question as well, but would that also apply if you have a suffix in your name, like you're known as John Smith Jr. or John Smith III?
Sure. Yeah. Again, I think that, it's up to you, right? That's your name. And so kind of your name is your brand, and how you brand yourself is up to you. And so you're welcome to include those things if that's something that you use pretty commonly. But if you feel like it's extraneous or not necessary, I guess my point is you don't have to have like the proper name on your birth certificate, right, on your professional branding. You have control over what you put there. And so if your preference is, I don't want to put the junior or senior, or I do want to, it's truly personal preference, whatever makes sense for you.
Great. Do we have any other questions coming in the chat? Oh, it looks like we had someone, the person who asked that question elaborated with, but what if your informal name is recognizable to a potential network?
I guess if it's a William Bill situation, I think people would probably recognize either or. And if you feel that one's more recognizable than the other, then certainly go with the more recognizable one. If you feel that one is going to be much more recognizable to a much broader base of people, then I would certainly use that, because it will help you, right?
All right, we don't have any, oh wait. Can you tell if an interview is going well or not well? If so, how? And what do you do if it's not going well?
I think, again, I think some people can tell that, right? This woman who I just spoke with yesterday, this Catherine Cat, she had an interview that she felt went horribly. And I asked her why she felt that, right? And she said, this woman just, she didn't have much energy. She just didn't seem that excited about me as a candidate. And by the way, on paper, knowing what this woman was interviewing for, knowing what the job was, I was like, that didn't make sense to me. And I said, look, sometimes interviewers don't bring energy to the party. So you can't always judge the interview based on that. Certainly it could mean the interview went poorly, but sometimes it doesn't mean that. It just means that person was having a bad day. It just means that that person was exhausted because they are doing, two jobs right now or something like that, right? You never know. So I think that, I've been in interviews that I have felt haven't gone well. So, I mean, certainly I can tell if and part of it is in me too. Like if I remember being in one where in meeting with this person years ago, I was like, I don't want this job. So I was like, I'm not going to kill myself to try and move to the next step. I'm just going to get through this and kind of, move on. And I kind of knew in that interview, it's not going to go anywhere. So all you can do, all you can control, I believe, is bring your best energy, bring your best preparation to that interview. And that's the best you can do and best performance that you can deliver. But some things are certainly out of your control, but just control what you can. And some of that is really just how you show up and how you portray yourself.
Great, thank you. And what is the best way to follow up with an interview, and what should you do if you don't hear back?
Okay, so if you have an interview, so always ask the person who's interviewing you for their email address. If they don't volunteer it, I didn't intentionally sometimes, forget, but sometimes I'd forget. Oftentimes I'd give people my card, of course, when we were in person back in the day. But now you need to ask that person for their email address. Hi, can I get your email address? I'd like to send, and you can be very straight. I'd love to send you a thank you note for your time today. And people expect that and they want to hear that. So don't feel uncomfortable asking. So you should send an email quickly. Ideally, people want to see those pretty quickly these days because it is an easy thing to do. So within 24 hours, ideally no more than 48 hours, but ideally 24 hours, you want to send that email to say thank you. It doesn't need to be a super long email, but you do want to acknowledge the fact that they took the time, and you want to reinforce why you're interested in the role. So you do want to follow up quickly. And if you don't hear, there's not a whole lot you can do, is the truth. If you don't have an email address, it's difficult to follow up. You can certainly look up people on LinkedIn. There's all sorts of techniques I teach people of, how you can try and find some people, but that's usually before the interview, not kind of after, because at that point, if they don't want to communicate with you, they won't. You kind of don't get that opportunity. But if you get their email and you don't hear a response, you don't spam them, but you do follow up every week or so. If they don't give you an answer, I usually want somebody to give me an answer. I'm okay with them telling me no, but just let me know, right? So, hey, I don't know if this got, and I'll reply to my first email if I don't hear anything after a week. Hey, I don't know if this got buried in your inbox, but I wanted to check in again, right? Don't be disrespectful, but there are some ways that you can kind of follow up without it seeming too pushy or worrisome, right? You don't want to give them any kind of indication that you're worried about it. You just have to continue with your process. Even when you're interviewing, I want you to know you still need to be putting applications out there, because your energy needs to be like, I'm open to anything out there, and I'm not only putting my eggs in this one basket. You know that that's important, right? Interviews equal way better job potential, but I want you to continue with that process, because that will kind of take your attention off of only focusing on what's the result of this interview as well.
Great, thank you. And what is the correct answer to where do you want to be in 5 years?
Well, certainly what's correct is what's correct for you. But I do suggest to people to say, look, my first priority is to really master this role that I'm interviewing for. That's my priority. I want to be absolutely knowledgeable and capable in this role. So that's my first focus. So depending on how long that takes, I don't know if that's going to take me 3 years or 5 years, but if you have a desire to move up in the organization, you could say, look, once I master this role, once everything here is running smoothly and perfectly in the way I'd want it, then I might be open to opportunities with additional responsibility. So that's a nice way of saying I might be open to that, but you aren't saying, hey, in a year I want to be promoted, right? If you don't want to be too aggressive about that, because certainly people who are hiring you want to have you certainly be in that role and be productive in that role. for a period of time, but you might say, like, once I master this, I might look to take on more responsibility. It doesn't necessarily mean you're looking to get promoted to a management role, but it might. It'll just depend on your circumstances.
Okay, and do you have any advice for people changing careers or people who have been out of their field for a while?
Yeah, changing careers if you're unemployed. So I'm going to speak to it from that perspective right now. Is tricky, especially now, because I've talked to some candidates who might have one background and then think, hey, it's better if I'm being much more broad based and applying. Maybe I can, I've done sales. I had a guy say to me last week, he's been very successful in sales, but he saw an HR posting he was interested in. But I had to let him know, look, unfortunately, this posting clearly says you need 5 years of experience in HR, and it says that you need HR certifications that you don't have. So you're probably not going to be able to make a run at that role. Now, having said that, I do believe people can reinvent themselves. I've reinvented myself a couple of times. You have to understand your top strengths and abilities, and you have to know, can I change these into something else? But if you're looking for kind of a more traditional path, your most effective way to get employment is to really be closely aligned with your most recent roles and apply for roles that are in that wheelhouse. So if you were in sales, applying for sales. If you were in marketing, marketing assistant, applying for a marketing assistant. Making it as easy as possible for the employer to see that you're a fit. Because the truth is, there are a lot of other people who meet the qualifications of the role out there. So if you think you're going to be a sales guy going into HR, the truth is there's a lot of HR people who qualify for the HR role, so you're not going to compete. And so you have a less efficient and effective job search. I'm all about efficiency and effectiveness, even if that means applying for fewer roles, but roles that are much more in your wheelhouse and much more, aligned with your strengths and your experience.
Okay, and I think our last question before we run out of time, we're going back to the informal versus formal name debate. If you choose to use your informal name, your nickname, such as Bill, will that potentially be a problem if employers run a background check?
No, I don't think so. I mean, again, when you fill out your application, you could put a different name on that. So that's the document where they're doing the background check, and that's where you could use your formal name. And I have a couple other things here. I'm going to address one more that I think a lot of people want to know, and this is, how do I address the fact that I was let go from my job? Because a lot of people are really uncomfortable about this. So I wanted to make sure I got this one in tonight. And if it's COVID related, it's very easy. I interviewed a woman today for my Facebook group, and she said it's like a non-issue to people. They understand people have gotten let go due to COVID. It's not going to be anything that's going to be viewed as a negative on you, right? As an employee, a lot of people are being let go and it has nothing to do with their job performance. So you can literally say something like, I was impacted by COVID layoff, or if you weren't impacted by COVID, let's say you were laid off prior to COVID even, what I would always coach people to say, and what I do coach people to say is, I was impacted by a restructuring at my company, and while I certainly wasn't expecting it to be in the job market, I'm actually encouraged to see how many roles there are that are aligned with my skills and experience. And I'm really excited to be speaking with you about this role today. So you hear how I'm taking a negative thing and I'm making it a positive, and I'm refocusing on them and talking about their role. So that's one question. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. I talked about this today, talking too much, telling people too much about your experience, and trying to kind of put 10 pounds of potatoes into that 5-pound sack. We don't want to do that. Behavioral questions, I suggest you look these up online. These are all about telling stories and having examples of what you've done in the past, because employers will view that as something that you'll do in the future. And we just talked about, what if I want to change my role or my career? Yes, you can, but it does take some work if you want to really make a big change. So I'll leave it with that. I had mentioned earlier, and then I'll let you wrap up, Allison, but I had mentioned earlier, I do have a free Facebook group that has lots of resources, lots of videos. Anybody here is welcome to join. It's a great community, and if you have any feedback, certainly you can let me know. But I appreciate the opportunity so much to be with all of you tonight. I hope that I have given you some information that can help you with your job search and can help you accelerate your results, because I'm all about trying to help people get the best results that they can at any time, but especially now.
Well, thank you so much, Lynée, for joining us, and thank you everyone for spending an hour and a half with us tonight. If you're interested in more jobs and careers programs, please visit the Arlington Heights Memorial Library website at ahml.info. We have a lot of virtual programs happening right now, so please check those out. And Lynée will be joining us again in October, so please be on the lookout for that. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful night. Thank you, Lynée.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Good night.